speaker, Paul Jeremias, that are talking about video games and films. Paul, are you here? You can hear me?
I am. I can
Yes,
hear you.
I introduce a little yourself, Paul. Paul Jeremias was a student of La Salle. For this reason, is today with us celebrating our 20th anniversary. And today is computer graphics engineer in Pixar. You are a computer graphics engineer, and today is lead graphics engineer at Pixar Animation Studios. He develops algorithms to help artists to make movies. Is credited in multiple films, including Soul, Toy Story, Incredibles, Coco and Finding Dory. And prior to Pixar, Paul worked in rendering technology for multiple games, including Star Wars. It's amazing. Also, is co-founder of Beauty Pie, a company dedicated to bringing corporate graphics everywhere. Today, Beauty Pie is Shattered Toy, the one biggest repository of computer graphics experiment ideas and projects. Very impressive curriculum, Paul. And today we are here to talk about the opportunities and new ways of vision of video games and film. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Also, thank you to the organizers for this wonderful event. So today I wanted to talk about what's beyond video games and film. Sometimes we get the feeling that we might be late in an industry, but I don't think that's the case here. And I wanted to convince you that is indeed not the case. But before, just a little bit of background, I've worked in film and games for quite some time, close to 15 years, I guess, or something like that. I worked in Star Wars games and then many movies as well. Also worked on building a community for creators around the world to share what they've learned when doing computer graphics called shadertoy.com. Additionally, built this tool called Mimics that we sold to a company called and allows for people to create computer graphics in the Zoom calls. And then finally, just recently, finished my last project, which was to run the biggest computer graphics conference called SIGGRAPH. So let's start though. This is a passion project, and I've always been curious about what's next. But I wanted to start with a disclaimer. Actually, I obviously don't know what the future is, and of course these are just my personal opinions of where the industry might go. So take it with a grain of salt. I wanted to start with this spectrum, and you might be wondering, why are we talking about film and games in the same presentation? Because as you see here, they're actually different, especially if you look at the type of the experience, right? If you look at how it's experienced, film is a very passive medium. You cannot just sit back and enjoy somebody else's story. Whereas in games, you actually have a say on that story. You're an actor in that story in many cases, and so they're actually quite far away from each other. But today I wanted to convince you that actually they are converging creatively in a constructive way, not in a destructive way. So you won't see one of the two mediums disappearing, but instead you will see more vocabulary that creators can use to tell their stories. And not just that, but I also wanted to convince you that the way in which film is created and the way in which games are created is also converging slowly but surely. And why does this matter? It matters because it has really never been a better time to be part of these industries. And in order to do that, I wanted to introduce today three pillars that I've been using to try to structure my thinking around this. And they will keep appearing throughout the presentation. The first pillar is stories. It's a very human thing to tell a story. In a way, I'm actually telling a story right now. But I tell a story to my daughter when she's going to bed. We tell stories in our daily stand-ups and our meetings, and it is very human, and it actually is a fundamental tool that we have to communicate our values, to communicate our culture, down to generations as well. So stories is one pillar. Another one is innovation. It's a very human thing as well to solve problems that we have faced over the years, and always pushing our boundaries and trying to see what's next. And finally, I will be coming back to throughout the presentation is community. Stories to a wall. We tell the stories to other humans, and we live in groups, and we that's a very thing. And as you will see, those three factors together really define where we're going. But I wanted to start at the very beginning and then make our way back into today, because I think it's important to consider history when trying to determine what. So in 1891, there was this thing called the kinetoscope, and for the first time, it actually allowed for people to put a story somewhere for somebody else to come in and see that story. And this is really cool. It had one limitation, which is very it's basically for one person. So you go there and you can see that story, but that's about it. And we've been telling the stories obviously for many years before that, and millenniums, right? There were like theater and other mediums aside from that. And so that quickly escalated, and then kind of we said that, hey, I mean, maybe we can get more people to enjoy that story that we baked into this medium, and so came up with this idea that maybe people gonna go together to a place, as a community, to a place to see this story that was baked into this. And that quickly escalated, actually. Sound introduced into this medium, and then there was color introduced into this medium. And innovation is always pushing the medium, but in a way, it's pushing the medium because we want to tell the story in the best way possible. We want to tell the story like how we think about it. We want to tell it, right? And the way we think about it is with color and with sound. And so they kind of like obvious things, right? Like looking back, like, okay, of course we wanted color, of course we wanted sound. But because there is this continuous pursuit of the best way to tell this. And then so that was it for in terms of movies. I want to jump to something a little bit different that happened around that time too, which is the introduction of the television. It's important because it allows for people to not have to go to a place to watch a story, where like you can actually now that story with your little community at home, of course, and that came through innovation and through the television, of course, and that kickstarted a whole industry of content creators and vendors that allow for people to watch content at home. Interestingly, that also kickstarted yet another industry, which is the gaming industry. That started quite early. This is one of the first prototypes for a gaming console. You still depend on another device like a TV, so it required that other device, of course, but it created its own little industry. And in a way, the movie industry was kind of worried about the fact that people are just at home watching the films instead of going to the movie theaters. And so that triggered yet more innovation on the movie industry and say like, hey, maybe you can see it in 3D, that's how I see my ideas or my story in 3D. Like when I tell a story to somebody else, think about it in 3D. So that might work. Then they also explore like IMAX. So like, hey, like we have these gigantic screens. It's going to be very immersive. It will be a really great experience to go to the theater and be part of that. Meanwhile, the industry continued to push forward on their path and introduce more consoles, and this is the Atari. But then after that, there was of course Nintendo kicked in, and then Sega and Sony and Microsoft. So it created a whole industry. At the very beginning, right, there's quite an isolating experience, right? But it quickly move forward from that and introduce community to it, right? Like suddenly, like you could play with other people. It wasn't a very isolating experience anymore. And through innovation, now we can tell stories that can be enjoyed together with your friends or people that you don't know. And that really changed the world. And that was the beginning of things like MMOs and MOBAs, battle royales, and other genres that have that really exploit the idea of a community and multiplayer gaming. Around the 2005, I wanted to highlight because it is important for what's coming next, which is YouTube and other websites around that time that were introduced.
Sorry for this. I think we have some technical issues with Paul. Are trying to solve as soon as possible because Paul is from California, and for this reason is not here today with us. We are waiting. Well, Paul is talking about very interesting history of film, and I think he introduced a very sociologist view how the films start in an isolate personal moment and to move to a community fact nowadays is the same in other channels. For example, is the same with the social media networks, and I think it's very interesting approach that we are listening with him. I asked if the technical well, we passed a video meanwhile we're trying to solve these technical problems as soon as possible. The video, please. We come back again. Hello, Paul. Sorry for this. Yes, you hear me?
Yes. Sorry.
Sorry for this. Yes, perfect. I think the connection today is not so good. You can continue, please.
Yeah, let me know if it stops at any time. Have rewind. Is this where it stopped in the YouTube part? Perfect. Yeah,
It's
I saw a
smart.
message popping up. Great.
Yes, it's
Okay,
this
thank you so
part.
much. Yes, so I was talking about YouTube and how that'll become important because really YouTube allow for people to distribute their content online, and that really was okay, but it really became super important when mobile devices appeared and allow for anybody to create content and to distribute it themselves to everybody out there. So you can just record a video, record a story, and send it to somebody, and that they can enjoy that. Uh, Mobile games also came around that same time, and it allowed for people to just be able to play anywhere, and really powerful. It created its own industry. Around that same time, movies as a service, where for the first time you can watch what you wanted from the comfort of your couch, and that's wonderful. And it created a whole other industry, right? It created Hulu and Disney Plus and so all these different companies have their own services now that you can sign up for. 2010, we saw the real-time democratization, which basically means that real-time engines like Unreal and Epic's Unreal Engine and Unity became accessible to everybody out there, which brought down the prices of creating content for mobile devices and for gaming consoles. So introduced a whole new industry of indie developers and people that wanted to express themselves and create their stories and create their games, either multiplayer or single player games. Uh, in 2010, games really follow up the same idea that movies introduced a while back, and started exploring what it for games to be a service. And so you can now go into PlayStation Now and just basically play any game whenever you want, thanks to the fact that you can just stream the game to your device directly. And so that created a bunch of different services as well that are available out there. Why not have people actually watch you play in the same way that we're watching stories being told by a movie director? Now we watch stories that are being told by our favorite streamer. And that quickly escalated into basically places like these, full of people, and everybody watching a subset of people playing games and in a competitive way. Esports was born. Um, but even cooler is the fact that you could actually now go outside and play a story that is physically rooted in a location. And so in 2016, there was this idea that hey, maybe the story can be played in the streets, and maybe you can go and catch Pokemons out there with your friends. In 2017, there was this idea that maybe movies don't have to be completely controlled by the director. Maybe we allow people to like rotate their head and like they can look around, and that was 360 film. And then there was VR styling that allowed for people to be a ghost in the story and browse where the story was happening. VR games allow people to actually be part of the game and actually experience the story as it was created originally. Very, very interesting, I think, that came out in that same year is the idea of interactive TV shows and movies, which is basically a stream that allows at some point for you to make a decision. Do you want to help Lucas in this case, or do you want to do something else? And the interesting bit of that is that it doesn't require a gaming console. It doesn't require anything. It goes directly to your TV through a streaming service. 2019, we started to see concerts being played within virtual worlds, and that's kind of incredible. And that was just the beginning. Then, of course, Epic keep experimenting with other ideas like that. That same year, we saw these things arriving in our, which is 5G. And now, why do I say that? Because I think they'll have a huge impact going forward, because I think we will require more bandwidth. And late last year, we started to see more short films actually being created with real-time technology, not just in the way that the content is created, but also in the way the content is delivered. Uh, all right. So we said all that. We're in 2021. Um, and I want to go back to the beginning. I said at the beginning that film and games are in very different parts of the spectrum of experiences that are available out there. But the reality is that in just the last 20 years, we've actually introduced a bunch of vocabulary within those two lines. And this is very interesting because it really allows for content creators to express the story in the way they want to tell it, right? Do you want a story that you have full control? Do you want to tell a story that you have a little bit of control? You can choose the adventure. Do you want a story in a way of a game? The person can actually be part of that story, or a VR game. So this is where we are. But what's next, right? We were talking about what was next. I believe that games and film will continue to converge in terms of content creation, and that's important because I can I think it's inevitable that the technology that is made for games will become more flexible to allow the total expression, the total artist expression necessary to create a movie in which art is the main driven idea. And in the case of film technology, we'll go the other way, in which we will start to see more and more tools that allow for more interactivity to reduce costs and reduce the time that it takes to make a movie. And so, like, those two things will slowly converge in the middle into a set of tools that will allow for the content creation that you can then target your product to whatever type of experience you wanted to make. That's one. I want to talk about streaming too, because I think we're going towards a direction in which we're going to see bundles and not like that we used to see with like a bunch of services. Yes, sure, we'll probably see that, but um, but I think a more interesting bundle is to start thinking about movies and games and all together in one. And and then if you start thinking that way, you might be wondering then, well, I will need a controller if I do that. Where do I get a controller to play TV, right? Go to Best Buy or something to buy a controller. But I think there is something simple that can happen in the coming years, which is the expansion of the idea of interactive TV shows. Like that idea that you can tell a story in which you have that branching, that can evolve farther and explore what's there in that little piece of the spectrum, because that piece of the spectrum can be played by anybody on their TVs without controllers. You don't need the familiarity. You don't need to go buy any controllers. You can play with your TV directly. And that's important because there's way many more TVs than consoles out there. I want to go back to this for my third and last point. In this spectrum, I left which is this area here. It's left empty in purpose because I actually skip a piece of history that also mattered, which is this book from 1992 called Snow Crash. So Snow Crash actually introduced the idea of the metaverse. And the metaverse it's really used to describe the concept of a future iteration of the internet made up of persistently shared 3D virtual spaces linked into kind of like a virtual universe, and and that's interesting. Then you can imagine how somebody could go somewhere and then enjoy any of those experiences in a way that is connected with your friends. And what is more important, I think, is that anybody can build those stories, and because everybody has a story to tell. And if we can create a system that allows for that expression, and we have the technology to back that, either through like very easy to create avatars, very easy to create worlds in which anybody can put together a scene or whatever it is that they're trying to tell the story, I think that's where the future is going. And of course, the metaverse will be experienced through glasses, through desktops, through really any device that is out there. And that's why 5G, I think, is also important. And that's already happening, right? Like if you look at Fortnite, if you look at Roblox, if you look at Minecraft, they're all going towards that direction. And just to wrap, I think a future in which everybody can tell stories to the people they care about is inevitable. And also, the only way to get there is through lots of innovation that still need to happen. And with that, thank you.
Very, very interesting speech. In my case, I'm sociologist, and I think you make a very perfect way the history from the beginning of the film to nowadays. I think you are talking about the fusion, more or less, between film and video games. I think is you said some interesting ideas. One of them is democratization of the creation of content. You said that at the beginning the film starts with the public was isolated and passive, and nowadays they are in a community and interacting way, and maybe this interaction in a near future is also a fusion between films and video games. This I understand well this idea.
Yeah, along those lines, yeah.
Okay, for me it's very, very, very interesting.
Yeah,
As you say, yeah, yeah.
yeah. I guess like I guess the point that I'm trying to convey is that until we reach the the moment in which anybody can tell the story that they're trying to tell to their kids, to their grandpa, in a way that is equal to how they have it in their. Until then, I think we'll continue to push forward towards that direction in which we're looking for more fidelity. We're looking to bring in people that we care about into a space so we can tell that story. And that story, of course, can be told to our kids, or it can be told to as a product, right, out there, like, you can sell it and so on. But I think it will not stop. It will continue to move forward until we get there. I think everybody has a story to tell, and to bring down the costs and bring down the technical requirements to express those stories, but everybody has something to say.
Okay, I have a question because as you know, a lot of students also is hiring today in the TDD for our 20th anniversary, and also we have here great in animation and article digital artists also. And what do you think is the recommended path for the students that want to enter in this sector?
Interesting. I think it kind of depends on how you learn, of course. In my case, it was always about creating something that helped me understand what I'm doing. And so projects became really important, and sharing those projects with the companies that I was interviewing and so on was fundamental, I think, for me being able to move forward. And so those projects that you're doing in university, I think they're the key to the success, especially for a student like me that really understands by doing. And I think I'm not alone with that, but I don't want to include everybody because I don't know everybody. But I think really those projects, and not being worried about sharing them online and going to websites like GitHub or something and creating your profile there, and potentially contributing with other projects that are out there. There's a lot of open source nowadays, which is very inviting, and usually they're wonderful communities. They have challenging problems. And sometimes they have also easy problems that you can help out and help them solve. And that all builds curriculum and credibility.
Okay, you recommend to learn by doing. That is something that we know very much here in La Salle.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
you obviously still need the like fundamentals, like like of course, the fundamentals of math and the fundamentals of computer science, like all those things are extremely important. Like you go nowhere, right? Or like at least like a person like me, like really needed those. But I think the projects is really what helps moving forward.
and to be passionate, as you said at the beginning. We finish here because we are out of time, and there are people waiting for us at the Congress room. Thank you very much, Paul. Very, very interesting speech. I learned a lot with your conference today, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And for the rest.